The taxi slowed down in the empty night street. She looked weak, hurt, almost afraid. "Please, just drive," she whispered. The driver didn't ask questions. He just helped her inside. But then, black armored soldiers suddenly dropped from the sky. They surrounded the taxi, weapons aimed. One of them spoke. "Step away from her, or you die." The driver froze. He looked at the woman in the back seat. She was no longer afraid. She was smiling, and her eyes were glowing. The city was quiet that night, but it was not peaceful. Neon lights flickered across tall buildings, and the wet roads reflected colors of blue and purple, while rain fell steadily from the dark sky, and the sound of distant flying vehicles echoed above. Down on the empty street, a small yellow taxi moved slowly through the rain. Inside sat a human driver named Armin. He was tired from a long day of work, long rides, difficult passengers, and very little money. Nothing new, just another day in a city that never cared. He rubbed his eyes and kept one hand on the steering while trying to stay focused. Just one more ride, he told himself, then he would go home. The road ahead was almost empty, and the silence felt heavy. Then suddenly he saw something. A figure standing under a broken streetlight. At first he thought it was nothing, just a shadow in the rain, but as he got closer, he realized it was a woman. She stood still, barely moving her body, slightly shaking as the rain poured over her. Her clothes were torn and soaked, and she looked like she could fall at any moment. Armin slowed down. Something about this felt wrong. People did not stand alone like this at night, not in this part of the city. It was dangerous, everyone knew that. He hesitated. His instincts told him to keep driving to avoid trouble. But then the woman moved slightly. Just enough to show she was still alive. Armin tightened his grip on the wheel. If he left, she might not survive the night. He let out a slow breath and pressed the brakes. The taxi stopped beside her. For a moment, he stayed inside, watching through the rain-covered window, unsure of what to do. Then he made a choice. He opened the door and stepped out into the cold rain. "Hey," he called out gently, "are you okay?" The woman did not respond at first. Her head was lowered, and her wet hair covered most of her face. Armin stepped closer, careful and alert. "I'm a driver," he said. "You need a ride." Slowly, she lifted her head. Her face looked pale, almost too pale, and her eyes met his. For a brief second, Armin felt something strange, something deep and hard to explain. Her eyes were calm, but they did not feel normal. "Please," she whispered. "Just drive." Her voice was soft but steady. Armin nodded quickly. "Okay, get in." He helped her in the back seat and noticed how light she felt, almost like she had no strength left. He closed the door and quickly returned to the driver's seat. The taxi began moving again through the rain. Inside it was quiet, very quiet. Armin looked at her through the mirror. She sat still, her head leaning slightly and her eyes now closed. "Where did he ask?" No answer. He tried again. "Where should I take you?" A few seconds passed before she spoke. "Anywhere safe." Her voice was calm, but something about it felt strange. Safe was not a word people used in this city. Still, Armin nodded and continued driving. Minutes passed with nothing but the sound of rain hitting the car. Armin kept glancing at her. Something felt off. Her breathing was too steady for someone so weak, and her body barely moved. Even the air inside the taxi felt different, heavier somehow. "You okay back there?" he asked. "Yes," she replied softly. Then silence again. Armin looked ahead, trying to focus on the road, but the feeling did not leave him. Something about her was not right, but he ignored it. He had made his choice, and he would not leave her now. Then suddenly a bright light flashed across the sky. Armin looked up, confused. More lights appeared, moving fast and sharp, not like normal traffic. His heart started beating faster. "That is not good," he whispered. Within seconds, multiple flying vehicles descended from above, moving with speed and precision. They surrounded the street, cutting off every direction. Armin slammed the brakes, and the taxi stopped in the middle of the road. The rain poured harder as the lights from the vehicles turned the night into a cold white glow. "What is this?" he said under his breath. Doors opened from the flying machines, and figures stepped out, tall, armored, and holding weapons. Not human. Their suits were dark, and their helmets hid their faces while red lights glowed from their visors. They moved quickly, forming a perfect circle around the taxi. Armin felt panic rising in his chest. One of them stepped forward, raising his weapon. "Driver," a voice said, cold and sharp. "Step out of the vehicle." Armin slowly opened the door and stepped out, his hands slightly raised. "What is going on?" he asked. "Try to stay calm." The voice spoke again. "Hand over the female passenger." Armin froze. Slowly, he turned his head and looked at the back seat. The woman sat there, quietly watching. She did not look scared. "Not anymore." "Why do you want her?" Armin asked. "That is not your concern," the soldier replied. Another soldier aimed directly at the taxi. "Step away, or you will be eliminated." Armin felt his heart pounding. This was bad, very bad. But he looked at her again. She said nothing, did nothing, just watched. Armin took a deep breath. "No," he said. The soldiers did not move. "Repeat," the leader demanded. "She is my passenger," Armin said more firmly this time. "I am not handing her over." The air went silent. The soldiers raised their weapons, higher energy beginning to build. "You are making a fatal mistake, human," the leader said. Armin stood his ground, even as fear filled his chest. Behind him, inside the taxi, the woman remained still. But something about her had changed. And as the soldiers prepared to attack, the night held its breath, waiting for what would happen next. The rain kept falling harder now, and the cold air felt heavier with every second. The soldiers stood in a perfect circle around Armin, their weapons glowing brighter as they aimed directly at him and the taxi. The leader stepped forward, his voice sharp and cold. "She is dangerous, move away." Armin did not move. His heart was beating fast, and his hands were slightly shaking, but his feet stayed firm on the ground. He looked back at the taxi for a moment, then turned again toward the soldiers. "She is just a passenger," he said. "She is hurt and scared." The soldiers did not react, but their weapons lifted higher. "You do not understand what you are protecting," the leader said. Armin shook his head slowly. "I do not care," he replied. "She asked for help, that is enough." The rain hit the ground harder as the silence stretched between them. The air felt tight, like something invisible was pressing down on everything. Then the leader raised his hand. A signal. One soldier stepped forward. His movements were slow, controlled, and careful. He lowered his weapon slightly, but kept his body ready for anything. Armin felt tension rise inside him. "Do not do this," he said, his voice more serious now. The soldier ignored him. Step by step, he walked toward the taxi. Closer and closer. The sound of his boots hitting the wet ground echoed in the quiet street. Armin's chest tightened. Something felt very wrong. Inside the taxi, the woman sat still, silent, watching. The soldier reached the door and placed his hand on it. He opened it slowly. The back seat was revealed. She sat there unmoving, her head slightly lowered, her presence calm, too calm. The soldier reached his hand toward her, just one move away from touching her. Then, everything changed. Time slowed down. The rain seemed to freeze in the air. The sound of the city disappeared completely. Armin felt it instantly, like the world had paused around him. Inside the taxi, the woman moved. Slowly. She lifted her head just a little. Her eyes opened fully. And in that moment, they were no longer normal. A faint glow appeared inside them. Soft but unnatural. Deep and powerful. The soldier did not react. He did not even realize what was happening. His hand kept moving closer. Then suddenly, he was gone, thrown backward with incredible force, as if something invisible had struck him. His body flew across the street and slammed into one of the flying vehicles. The impact was loud and violent. Metal bent, and sparks exploded into the rain. The ground shook under the force. Time snapped back to normal. The rain returned. The sound returned. Everything rushed back at once. Armin gasped in shock. "What was that?" he whispered. The other soldiers reacted instantly. Weapons raised fully. Positions tightened. But none of them fired. They froze. Because they all saw it. The woman had not moved from her seat. She had not touched the soldier. And yet he had been thrown like nothing. The air around the taxi changed again. Heavier. Stronger. Almost suffocating. Armin slowly turned his head toward the back seat. His eyes locked onto her. She was different now. Her head raised fully. Her glowing eyes looking straight ahead. Calm. Unafraid. Powerful. A cold feeling ran through Armin's body. She is not weak, he thought. Not even close. His breathing slowed as he tried to understand what he was seeing. Inside the taxi, she turned her gaze slightly toward him. For a brief moment their eyes met. Then she spoke. You should not have stayed. Her voice was no longer soft or fragile. It was steady calm and filled with quiet power. Now you are involved. Armin swallowed hard. Involved in what he asked quietly. She did not answer. Instead, she looked past him. At the soldiers. At the leader. Her glowing eyes held no fear. Only silence. The leader stepped forward again, but his movements were now slower, more careful. Confirmed, he said into his helmet, target is active. There was a short pause. Then his voice came again, requesting reinforcement. Armin felt his chest tighten. Reinforcement, he repeated under his breath. Before he could think further, the sky lit up again. More lights appeared, faster than before. More flying vehicles descended from above, filling the space with their presence. Within seconds, the number of soldiers doubled, then tripled. The street was completely surrounded. No way out. No escape. Armin turned slowly, looking in every direction. Every path blocked. Every exit covered. This is bad, he whispered. The leader raised his weapon again, but still did not fire. Last warning, human, he said. Step away, you are not part of this. Armin stayed silent for a moment, his mind racing. Nothing about this was normal. Nothing about her was normal. But he looked at her again. She sat there calm, like none of this mattered. Like she expected it. Who are you, he asked quietly. She did not answer, but her eyes softened for a brief second before returning to the soldiers. The leader made another signal. This time 3 soldiers moved forward, faster, more aggressive, weapons fully ready. They were not trying to take her gently anymore. They were prepared to force it. Armin stepped forward, quickly placing himself between them and the taxi. Stop, he shouted. The soldiers paused for a brief second. That was enough. Armin spread his arms, slightly standing firm. You are not taking her, he said. His voice shook, but he did not step back. The soldiers raised their weapons fully. Energy built at the tips, brighter and stronger than before. The leader spoke one final time. Then you will fall with her. The air became heavy again. The tension stretched to its limit. Behind Armin, inside the taxi, the woman watched silently, her glowing eyes steady. But deep inside, something was rising. Something far more powerful than anyone there could understand. And this time, it would not stay hidden. The air above the street grew heavier as the soldiers tightened their formation around Armin and the taxi. Weapons were still aimed, but no one fired yet. The tension was so strong it felt like the entire city was holding its breath. Then a deep sound came from the sky. Not thunder, not engines, something far more powerful. A large black ship descended slowly through the clouds. Its size was much bigger than anything seen before. It blocked the light above the street and covered everything in shadow. The wind picked up violently as it landed in front of the soldiers. The ground shook under its weight. The doors opened, and a new figure stepped out. He was different from the others. His armor was heavier and marked with glowing lines. Every soldier around him immediately stepped back. He walked forward slowly and stopped a few steps away from the taxi. The leader of the soldiers, who had been giving orders before, suddenly lowered his weapon. His posture changed completely, and then he did something no one expected. He knelt, not in fear, not in panic, but in deep respect. Armin's eyes widened in shock. He could not understand what was happening. The strongest-looking soldier here was kneeling, right in front of the taxi. The new leader lowered his head slightly and spoke with a calm but powerful voice. Dragon Empress. The words hit Armin like a shockwave. He froze completely. Dragon Empress. He slowly turned his head toward the back seat. The woman he had helped in the rain. The woman he thought was weak and injured. She was still sitting there, silent, watching. But everything about the situation was changing now. The soldiers around them lowered their weapons slightly. Not fully, but enough to show fear and respect. Armin whispered under his breath, Empress. His mind struggled to understand. The woman slowly moved. She placed her hand on the seat and stood up. And in that moment, everything changed. Her weak and broken appearance faded like it never existed. Her posture straightened. Her presence expanded. The air itself felt heavier, stronger, like reality was bending around her. The rain above slowed slightly as if even the sky was reacting. Armin took a step back without realizing it. She was no longer a fragile passenger. She was something else entirely, something far beyond human understanding. The soldiers did not move. They could not move. Above them, the clouds began to shift. Dark shapes started moving inside them. Massive shadows passed across the sky. One by one, more appeared. Armin looked up slowly. His eyes widened in disbelief. Huge silhouettes filled the storm clouds. Then a roar echoed across the sky. Deep, powerful, unnatural. The clouds split open for a moment, and Armin saw them clearly. Dragons. Real dragons. Massive creatures with glowing eyes and enormous wings that blocked the sky. Their presence alone made the air feel heavier. The ground seemed smaller beneath them. Armin's legs felt weak. This was not a normal world anymore. The Empress looked up at them calmly, and the dragons responded. They circled above the city slowly, waiting, watching, obeying. Armin's mind struggled to accept what he was seeing. He had picked her up like a normal injured passenger. He had helped her like any human would help another. But now he understood. He had protected someone who controlled something beyond armies, beyond planets. The Empress finally spoke. Her voice was calm, but carried deep authority. I was attacked. Her eyes shifted toward the sky. They tried to weaken me, control me, take my throne. The soldiers around her stayed silent, afraid to interrupt. She continued. They thought I was lost. Armin swallowed hard. His throat felt dry. He had stood between her and danger. He had refused armed soldiers. He had risked his life without knowing who she was. Now everything made sense, and yet nothing did. The Empress turned her gaze slightly toward him, and Armin felt it immediately. That power, that pressure, that presence. She spoke again, and they will not stop. The sky darkened further, as if reacting to her words. More ships appeared in the distance, red lights forming across the horizon. The enemy was returning, preparing for a full attack. Armin looked around slowly. The battlefield was not over. It had only just begun. The soldiers around them shifted into position again, weapons charging, waiting for command. The dragons above roared louder, circling faster. The Empress stood in the center of it all, calm, unshaken, absolute. Armin stood beside his taxi, trying to process everything. He whispered quietly to himself, I just helped the Dragon Empress. His voice was barely audible, but the weight of it was enormous. Above them, the sky filled with movement. The enemy forces returning, the dragons preparing, the Empress watching, and Armin standing in the middle of a war he never asked for, but had already changed just by being there. The sky above the city was no longer calm. Dark clouds moved violently as the dragons circled higher, and the enemy ships formed a wide attack pattern in the distance. The entire battlefield felt ready to collapse into chaos at any second. Armin stood near his taxi, his hands still shaking slightly, but his eyes focused on the Empress. The soldiers around them moved into defensive positions, but the tension kept rising. Then the leader spoke directly to Armin. This is not your war. Leave now. His voice was firm and final. Armin stayed silent for a moment. His mind told him to run, to escape, to survive. But his eyes moved to her. The Empress stood still in the center of the storm of war, calm, powerful, watching everything without fear. And in that moment, Armin remembered something simple. She had been in his taxi. She had asked for help. She had trusted him without knowing who he was. He slowly shook his head. No. The leader frowned. You will die here, human. Armin stepped forward slightly. You are my passenger, he said quietly. That is enough. The words were simple, but they carried something strong. A silence spread through the soldiers. Even the Empress turned her head slightly toward him. For a brief moment, her expression changed. Not surprise, not shock, something deeper, something she had not felt in a very long time. The enemy ships above shifted their position. Energy weapons began charging. Bright red light filled the sky. The dragons roared louder and started descending from the clouds like falling storms. The battlefield exploded into action. A massive blast hit the ground nearby, shaking everything. Armin stumbled, but quickly regained balance. The Empress raised one hand and blocked a wave of energy that was coming toward them. The impact sent shockwaves across the street. Armin looked around quickly. Everything was falling apart. Buildings shaking, metal burning, soldiers shouting orders, dragons crashing into enemy ships in the sky. It was pure chaos. But Armin did not run away. Instead, he turned toward the taxi. This way, he shouted. He opened the door quickly. Empress, get in. For a moment, she did not move. She simply looked at him, as if studying his decision. Another explosion hit nearby, forcing debris into the air. Still, she stood there. Armin grabbed the door harder. We need to move now. Another blast shook the ground. This time she moved. Calmly. She stepped into the taxi. Armin rushed into the driver's seat immediately. His hands gripped the wheel tightly. The engine roared to life. Behind them, enemy forces were closing in from the sky and ground. Armin slammed the accelerator. The taxi shot forward through the broken street. Debris flew everywhere. He turned sharply, avoiding falling metal and burning wreckage. The Empress sat in the back seat, watching him closely. Not speaking, just observing. Another energy blast hit the road ahead. Armin reacted instantly. He turned the wheel hard, and the taxi drifted sideways, just missing the impact. The shockwave pushed the car slightly, but he controlled it. He breathed heavily. This is insane, he muttered. Above them, dragons crashed into enemy ships, tearing them apart midair. Explosions lit the sky like burning stars. But Armin kept driving. He did not have weapons. He did not have armor. He only had instinct and determination. He spotted a narrow path between collapsing buildings. Go left, he told himself. He turned the taxi into the tight space. Metal structures fell behind them as they passed through. A soldier appeared ahead, aiming a weapon at them. Armin did not stop. He accelerated. The taxi rushed forward. The soldier barely jumped aside as they passed. The Empress remained calm in the back seat, still watching, still silent. But her eyes followed every move he made, every decision, every risk. Another explosion shook the ground, and the taxi lifted slightly before landing hard. Armin gritted his teeth. Hold on, he said without looking back. He pushed the car harder. The road ahead was unstable, but he kept going, because stopping meant death. Behind them, the battle continued to grow. Dragons roaring, ships falling, energy blasts tearing the sky apart. And yet inside that small moving taxi, a human driver was doing the only thing he knew. He was driving, saving her the only way he could. The Empress leaned slightly forward, watching him more closely now, not as a ruler, not as a godlike being, but as someone trying to understand why this human refused to leave, why he risked everything for a passenger, and in the middle of destruction. That question became louder than the war itself. The battlefield slowly began to quiet down. The explosions became fewer. The energy blasts faded into the distance, and the roaring sky started to calm as the dragons took control of the air above the ruined city. One by one, the enemy ships began falling from the sky, some burning, some broken, some retreating, until finally, silence started to return. Armin brought the taxi to a slow stop on a broken road. His hands were still tight on the wheel. His breathing was heavy, and his eyes were fixed on the sky. The war was ending. The dragons now dominated the clouds, moving in powerful circles, as if guarding the entire world below. The Empress stepped out of the taxi, and Armin followed after a moment. The city around them was destroyed, but strangely peaceful now. Smoke rising, metal burning, rain falling softly again, as if the world itself was healing. The Empress stood in the center of it all, her presence stronger than ever. No weakness left, no injury, only absolute power. She could feel it. Every dragon above was hers. Every remaining enemy was already broken. She could end everything in a single command. But she did not move. She simply looked at Armin. For a long moment she said nothing, just studied him, the human who stood in front of her. Small, simple, but still standing after everything. Then she finally spoke. You saw me as weak. Her voice was calm, but deep with meaning, and still chose to protect me. Armin scratched the back of his head slightly, trying to act normal even after everything that had happened. He said slowly, you needed help. That was all. The Empress tilted her head slightly. She had ruled for centuries, controlled entire empires, commanded dragons that shook the sky. But no one had ever done what this human did. No one had ever helped her without fear or desire. No one had ever stayed beside her just because it was right. She raised her hand slightly and spoke again. You will be rewarded. Armin blinked. Rewarded. She continued. Wealth beyond your imagination. Power over cities. Or safe passage anywhere you choose. The wind moved softly around them as the dragons circled above, watching quietly. Armin looked at her, then at the destroyed street, then at the taxi behind him. He gave a small, tired smile. Honestly, he said, I do not need any of that. The Empress paused. For the first time in a very long time, someone refused her offer. Armin shrugged slightly. It was just another ride. That is all. Silence followed. The Empress stared at him, not as a ruler, not as a conqueror, but as something closer to a person trying to understand another. Then slowly, a small smile formed on her face. Soft, real, not controlled, not powerful, just human in a strange way. For the first time, she did not look like the Empress of Dragons. She looked like someone who had been understood. That is a rare answer, she said quietly. Armin simply nodded. Yeah, well, I try to keep things simple. The dragons above slowly began to rise higher into the sky. The battlefield was fully silent now. The war was over. But something had changed forever. In the days that followed, the city rebuilt itself slowly. People talked about the war in whispers, about dragons in the sky, about a mysterious empress. But no one knew the full truth. Only one man did. Armin. He continued his normal life, driving his taxi through the same streets, same routes, same nights, until one evening, he stopped at a quiet corner when he saw her again, standing under a street light, calm, waiting, just like before. Armin sighed softly and smiled. He opened the door. She stepped inside the taxi, and everything around them shifted again. The air felt heavier instantly. The city lights flickered slightly. Even the sky seemed to react. But inside the taxi, it was just the two of them again. Normal. Quiet. Armin looked at her through the mirror. Where did he ask? She looked at him for a moment, then gave a soft, calm smile. Anywhere, she said. Armin nodded and started driving. The taxi moved forward slowly through the quiet city. And for the first time, there was no war, no danger, no soldiers, just a human driver and the Dragon Empress. But now, every time she entered his taxi, the entire city felt it, because even in peace, her presence was still enough to remind the world that legends never truly disappear.